video I'm just going to be talking through how I went about painting this Operative Darth Vader from Star Wars Legion by Fantasy Flight Games. He was primed via airbrush with Vallejo polyurethane black surface primer, and then we're going to get into it. What I started off with was light grey. So what I'm doing with the light grey is just defining that texture on all the leather areas to start with, and roughly placing my topmost highlights. So then we can blend them in later. No need to be particularly neat. I'm just defining where those highlights are going to be and trying to honour the texture that's already in the sculpt. And sometimes you can make the texture up too. So on the arm here, I'm going to try and leave all those little creases. And even where there isn't a crease, you can make it look like there's one. And the main thing here is that not only you've thinned your paints correctly, but you've not loaded too much into your brush. You got it all thinned how you want it, and then you load too much in, you're going to have a really hard time trying to be accurate with it. And the more accurate you are now, the less work you got to do later, but you'll see that this is going to be a lot of backwards and forwardsing. So then we're going to use Game Ink Black and start redefining some of those shadows we might have accidentally filled with the light grey. But I'm also trying to glaze that light grey at the same time a little bit to make a dark grey, which we can then bring back up with more light grey. See, I'm avoiding getting that ink on the very most raised areas where the strongest highlight would be. And if you do make a bit of a mistake and get too much ink on there, you can use a clean brush like I am now. You can use your finger to wipe it off the tops of that texture. But basically just remember the ink is pretty highly pigmented, so don't use it quite like a wash. You don't want to load much into the brush, and try and be a bit more precise with it. What I'm doing now is starting to use the ink to blend my highlights back into the black. So I'm placing the ink on the light grey, pulling it towards the dark area, and we're needing to wiping that ink off. And you get a nice easy gradient. And then you just start backwards and forwardsing with the light grey and the ink, and you can work some black wash in there too. So what I'll sometimes do is I'll do this next highlight step, then I'll just use a black wash so it's not as harsh as the ink over the whole thing, just blends it all together, and then one more highlight, and that'll be it. So what I'm doing here is re-establishing that highlight with the light grey. So it's kind of my little test area. This sleeve went a bit too dark. So now I'm just bringing it back up, trying to just touch the tops of that texture. So then we move on to the cloth. So mainly the cape. And he's got the little bits on the front too. And what I'm going to do with these is try and get quick blends, try, being the operative word, using the loaded brush technique, which some of you may have come across before, may not have. But basically what you're doing is that you're loading two colours into the brush. And only one of those colours is at the tip. So what I've done is I've loaded the brush with black primarily, and then light grey in the end, the tip, and then you're trying to blend out of the bristles of the brush and on the model. So what I'm doing here is not just relying on the loaded brush, which you don't have to. You can use a wash or an ink to refine what you've done. So you've got your quick rough blend with your loaded brush, and then you can use glazing and layering techniques with the loaded brush to just refine it. So I'm just adding some black wash here, because I didn't do so great a job with my loaded brush. So here we go with the loaded brush on the other side. So see, I'm just placing the light grey in the tip of the brush, and then you increase the pressure, and that'll make the brush start to unload, I guess, the black, and you get this kind of nice gradient. But it does take a little bit of feel. See, I've loaded more light grey in now, and just going again, and you just feather the light grey and it mixes on the model, it mixes in the brush. It's hard to see when it's wet and glossy in the light, but it's a really quick, really quite easy way to get a decent blend. And then you can just repeat it the whole way around the model. If you give yourself one model to just practice this on, you'll probably, by the end of it, you'll be a lot better. And it's a really versatile technique. We don't get to use it much on this Darth Vader, but you can start doing it back to front, so you're loading the grey in, and then you've got black at the tip, and you're working out of the shadows into the highlights. And then, like I already mentioned, you can refine the work you do with the loaded brush. You get the really quick gradient. You can refine it with glazes and washes. So it's harder on these smaller areas, but it can definitely still be done. But instead, what I'm doing here is a similar technique to what I did with all the leather. I'm using the light grey and just placing those highlights in really roughly. And then I'm going to use the black ink to give me the texture back where I might have accidentally filled it in, and start to blend it. Just the same as we did on the gloves and the pants. So here's that black ink again. See, I'm just trying to redefine those creases. And then also start to feather that light grey out and back into the black. Not too much. Yeah, well placed finger and or thumb. Fixed it up pretty good. So here you just see that after the ink, I'm just grabbing the Army Painter dark tone and glazing, washing it over the whole area just to tie it together. And then you can come back with more light grey if you feel the need. So here we go with the cape. I'm probably not going to dwell on this too much. If you'd like me to talk more about the loaded brush, you can let me know. There is other videos out there. Ben Comets comes to mind. But you can really see here on the cape how you can get a pretty damn nice blend. And usually the biggest mistake you can make is you get a nice blend and you go, oh, and you touch it again. Like I always do. So I've tried to pick the best sections of the cape to show what I've been talking about. As you can see, I'm almost done with it. This is like not even half an hour to get this whole cape done to that standard, which I think's alright for a tabletop miniature. So now we're moving on to the armor. Pretty much the same, using the loaded brush, but we're going all the way up to white now because it's shiny. This shin pad's a really good example of how you increase the pressure on the brush when you're doing the loaded brush to release the second color. It doesn't necessarily need to be the darker color, it is in this case. But you place that light color and then you start to press and blend right there on the model. And since I've only got my phone camera to film with, I've lost focus here and I have no idea. I thought I'd locked it. Apparently not. You can definitely do multiple passes to make sure you get the blend that you want. Because your paint should be nice and thin, you'd have to do a hell of a lot of layers before you're causing any issues. Just make sure you let the first one dry. Don't be impatient like I am most of the time, and I didn't quite like how that blend worked out, and then I try and do one wet over wet and it just doesn't work out. Don't have to wait long, and then you can do your second go at it. And just remember, you can always do your refinement with your washes and your inks after you've done your quick loaded brush blend. Never forget how effective a well-placed finger can be. We're going to move on to the helmet now, which is where the majority of the time went into this model. I started off slightly differently on this area, just above his left eye. What I did was I painted some wet black before I went in for my loaded brush, so I was going to put it onto a wet surface, and that's just to help me do the backwards blend. So you see I'm blending it now down that on my right hand side of the helmet, and then that wet black paint that I placed before I started my loaded brush is just going to help me feather that out the other direction. I find it handy to do that on these really small areas where you don't have much room to maneuver your brush and do your blend. On the armor components, I'm working in some white edge highlights just to help give it that glossy feel and differentiate it a bit further from the leather elements of the model. I'm assuming anyone who's watching this is pretty familiar with doing edge highlighting, so we're not going to talk about that too much. Otherwise, the helmet being a rounded surface does make it a bit more difficult to get those highlights right. There was a lot of backwards and forwardsing, as this whole model has been. Refining and backwards and forwards, and as you can see here, I'm doing a loaded brush on this top right hand side of the helmet. I went a bit overboard with this one. Too much white, I'm trying to fix it, it's not working. Wipe some of that white off, and just trying to blend in some of that black. Kind of saved it. Now we've got just black. Should probably just leave it now, let it dry, have another go, but that would be the easy way. This whole model took me about 3.5 hours to paint, and I reckon an hour of it was doing the helmet and then doing the glow off the lightsaber. But he's pretty much done. There's the little greeblies and details to do, but I'm not going to cover those. You can figure that out. Little green dots, little red dots. So lightsaber, and you could call him done. Lightsaber was just built up from grey to white, red, then a white edge to mimic the box art. The glow's optional, obviously. Just make sure you keep referencing where that lightsaber is. I don't have it attached, so it's not in the way. But I'm just stippling in white just to mark where I want that glow to be, or the most intense section of the glow. Then I'll be mixing the white with a bit of the flat red to make a pink, and stippling that out a little bit further. And then what I'll do is I'll back and forwards between this pink and the white, building up the intensity where I want it, and pushing the glow out where I want it. And then I'll start glazing just flat red over the whole thing. And then that'll really pop where you've placed this white. So you place the white where you want the most intense glow. You place the white on edges that are going to catch the glow. And then you paint the flat red over the white. And you glaze it over that pink that you placed, and you get your little glowy effect. This is also optional. It looks good in person. It didn't really show up in the video and the photos so well. But I just differentiated all the different blacks by putting satin varnish over the leather, matte varnish over the cloth, and gloss varnish over the armor. And I think it looks pretty good. Otherwise, that's it. He's done. Thanks for watching. This video is longer than I intended. If you made it this far, there is an eBay link in the description for this model. Just decided, why the hell not? I'll buy another one, paint another one. It was fun, so I can sell this one. I do have plans for more videos. Not sure when or how, but it'll probably be Legion based. So subscribe, hit the bell, those things that you do on YouTube, and thanks for watching.